Rock stars, songwriters, the sidemen and women, music producers, and more join Dayna Steele each week to talk about the rock business. Slide into the booth and join the conversation. This is Dayna's Diner on Houston Radio Platinum.
Joining me today on Dayna's Diner is somebody who can shed light on what to me has always felt like kind of a, it's a secret process. It's a secret. We all bitch about it, but we don't know how it actually happens. And what I'm talking about is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. We've got a fantastic class that's been announced that's going to be inducted later this year. Lots of friends who are in. Ozzy coming in. He's been in with his band. Now he's coming in. There should be actually a category for wives, the power behind the rock stars, so that we could nominate Sharon. But I thought, how much fun would it be to find out a little bit more about how the Rock Hall of Fame actually works? And I have a wonderful friend in Palm Springs, California. Met him through mutual friend Spike Edney, who's been on Dayna's Diner from Queen. And he serves on the board of directors of the Rock Hall. And that is uber smart attorney and really tall, cute guy, Jaime Siegel. So it says that on your card, right? Uber smart lawyer
Yeah,
guy.
Vistaprint had tried to take that out as an error, but I assured them it was correct.
So you are on the board of directors for the Rock Hall. I guess I never thought about that, but they do. They're a nonprofit. They need a board. I know the story, and it's a funny long story, but I'll let you tell a little bit of it. I mean, is it something you've always aspired to be on, the Rock Hall board, or how did it happen?
So, well, officially, my title, I am a member of the Board of Trustees of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum based in Cleveland. Because what most people don't know is there's two organizations. There's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Foundation, which is based out of New York, which was the organization that was mainly run by Jan Wenner, where he was the head of, was founded out of Rolling Stone magazine. And then the museum, when it started, I guess it's almost like 27, 28 years ago, but going back to the 80s. So the museum, I'm on the museum board, and there's an affiliation between the museum, obviously, and the foundation, which I won't go into. But, I've always been a huge music fan, although if you asked 15-year-old Jamie, I would have said you're out of your mind to suggest something like this. And it just always seemed like a really fun, who doesn't love music? I mean, everybody knows your first concert. Everybody knows the concert you hated, the concert you loved, who you met, what you did, where you were. I could tell you that I was driving to Action Park on the day of Live Aid because I wasn't savvy enough to go to the concert. So we were going to an amusement park and listening to it in the car, driving to Action Park in Vernon, New Jersey. But I think it's really awesome being a part of such an amazing organization. I follow a really strict rule of I want to have fun with my philanthropies. And fundamentally, it's a philanthropy, right? It's awesome that it's really cool. We're dealing with musicians and rock, but at the end of the day, the museum does a tremendous service of preserving the culture in a museum format for people to look back and I can't help but notice there's no museum for Glenn Dorsey's orchestra, right? It's a different. Our grandparents weren't going to a museum to go relive the glory days of the big bands, but rock and roll has this incredibly amazing cultural movement where, I mean, we're still listening. I listen with my kids with music that I was like, hey, this song is 50 years old. Isn't it great? And there's this, yeah, this is really cool. It didn't really happen for our parents' generation, right? It's like, oh yeah, that boy, that cello and the lineup of tenor saxes. I mean, they were really moving me. So the other thing that the museum really does, which is really huge to me and near and dear, is education of music for kids. And they teach tens of thousands of kids every year music education on history, on all sorts of aspects about music in general with a taint towards rock and roll. But I think music is a common thread no matter what culture you go to. People know,
That was one of my favorite parts of the museum. Jamie set up a lovely VIP tour for us with one of the docents that got assigned to us was just friggin' amazing. He couldn't have been any better and huge, another old guy like me, rock and roll fan. But I loved the actual studios, the actual instruments that you could go in and sit down and play, and you never knew who was around that would just show up and start playing with you. And there were musicians on staff. So it is a very much hands-on museum. I was so excited to do that. How do they come up with the list
Yeah.
of people? I mean, what is the process? Like I said, we all bitch about it. So
Yeah.
and so didn't get in. Why did that person get in? But walk me through the process of how do you get into, well, like our mutual friend, Paul Rogers of Bad Company, Paul Rogers of Free, one of the top 10 rock vocalists of all time, is not in the Rock Hall of Fame. But I
Crazy.
wouldn't even know how to start. But what's so great about him, he's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people are they generally when people are very lackadaisical about it, but then when they get that honor and they get tapped, everybody really loves it.
That's
So
what
it's
I think. Even though he's very low key and it's, Paul, it's not that he's lackadaisical. He's just a nice, sweet, kind man who
Oh,
doesn't like
God,
to make waves. But I'm like, you need to be in there. So walk me through the process, Jamie
yeah.
Siegel.
So there's a nomination committee that is attached to the foundation. And the nomination committee, even I'm not really sure exactly who's on it. I believe that guys like Tom Morello and Dave Grohl are on the board on the nomination committee, but also a lot of record execs are on the nomination committee. Let me also just add that any opinions I express are my own personal opinions
I know. I should
and
be on the
not
nomination
reflective
committee.
of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. But the nice thing about rock and roll boards is that we all have a lot of opinions, and it's not a meek board of a bunch of shut-ins that don't know how to communicate. So it's a lot of fun. And we all have a lot of opinions. And the common thread, by the way, comes back to if people are bitching about the Rock Hall and the nominations, it falls into the category of there's no such thing as bad press. If they're bitching about it and complaining about it, it's because they care about it, right? So what happens is that there's a nomination. Look, for many years, the I guess I probably shouldn't comment on rumors and scuttlebutt, but let's just say it's noticeable that a couple really big artists that may not have been in the favor of the powers that were in control, that normally you would expect to be in a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, weren't there. Because at the end of the day, people are people, right?
Yeah.
And
Personalities. There you
personalities
go.
matter. And yeah, and luckily, celebrities and music executives have no personalities at all. There's no
No
egos.
opinion, no
Oh,
personality.
it's so that there's clearly some, you'd like to think that people get nominated because of their contribution to music, both in terms of either being massive sellers of music or being major influencers of music. I mean, for me personally, I generally only vote for musicians and bands that actually made a difference, right? In my measure, if you talk to another musician and they said, "Yeah, that person was really influential. They really did some important stuff." I don't know. I think that kind of carries more weight than, oh, nobody really, they didn't influence anybody. Nobody's walking around saying, "I want to be them," but they sold, hundreds of millions of albums.
That's what I
Uh,
love when I was talking to Danny Miranda, who's played bass for Blue Oyster Cult forever. And, I like it when I can ask the question, who influenced you? And he didn't even have to think twice. He was like Elton John. And I
it's
mean, he
crazy.
could just gush and he could tell you everything. And
I,
it's not what you would have expected maybe for the bass player of Blue Oyster Cult, who also played with
yeah.
Queen. But yeah, he was adamant. Elton John.
I mean, isn't that wild? You meet some of these guys, they come and women, and they come out. They're heavily tattooed. They're wearing leather. They look tough, and then they talk about how they were influenced by Cher or by Lionel Richie. And it's. I will admit that I'm not a historian or an expert. My brother Brian is absolutely our savant in the family. Um, and I'm always a little surprised I personally think some of the people that have been nominated and inducted lately, they're great, fantastic human beings and musicians and entertainers and wildly popular and successful. But for me personally, because rock and roll is really a personal thing, is that rock and roll? And I would debate that they're really not. They belong like they belong whatever honors, Kennedy Center honors, whatever museum, wherever they are. But rock and roll. But on the other hand, I think rap 100% belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, I love the rap
I mean,
exhibit that
if
walked you through
rap
the very
isn't rock and
beginning.
roll, I mean, what the hell's rock and roll if it's not rap? I mean, it's anti-establishment. It talks to the people. It was getting people who view themselves as oppressed, giving them a foothold into the culture. I mean, it's exactly what happened back in the 50s and 60s, you know, getting it out of the big band culture from my earlier reference. And to me, rap, it shares blues lines, it shares a heavy beat line. I mean, all things. I think people may have some personal biases against rap, which have nothing to do with the music at all, and I think that taints a lot of people's opinions. But there's a lot of rock and roll music that I don't like because it doesn't carry any musicality for me, right? I mean, my daughter loves hardcore. Personally, that's great. And I think that everybody should love what they love. I don't love it because I don't get a musicality out of it. And I'm sure that if I was a fan, I might spend more time and get it out of there. But just on, first impressions matter. But I like almost any kind of music.
So
And
you have
so
this nominating committee
yeah.
that and so they kind of come up with a list. How many do they come up with?
So it varies. This year there was a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
typically it was 5 nominees get inducted. And maybe there's the Ermit Artigan Award or some other award for lifetime achievement. But this year is an extraordinarily high number of people getting in. And what I do is, so just to go back to the process. So when there's a nominee, when the people are nominated, then it goes out to effectively the music community. So there's people that are designated as voters. There's just generally musicians, certainly all Hall of Fame inductees, music executives, anybody affiliated with the music industry. I'm a Howard Stern friend. You get, Gary Delabate is producer, is a voter. And there's I don't know what the exact number is. I could be wrong. I think it's around 1,000-ish. Could be less, could be more. And they vote. And then they run the public vote, which is people see the public vote. And we get millions and millions and millions of votes. But not to disappoint it, it's about getting people encouraged. But the public vote accounts for 1 vote officially. So, and I think
Really, all those millions of votes count for
yeah, and
one
that may
vote.
stir up some bad thinking. They're like, oh my God, look at how they won the public vote. Yeah, but it was only 1 vote. So, I mean, as a board, the board of trustees, we combined get 1 vote. I mean, we get 5 votes, but it's, I get the vote and then they collate our board and we get our 1 vote as our board of the museum. And we had to fight for that. I mean, it's
Wow.
we got that for years. So I've been on the board for 13 years. Back to your earlier comment, I just want to say, when I joined the board, you weren't even allowed to take pictures in the museum. Could you imagine that? In today's world, you couldn't take a picture. There was no interactivity. And it just goes back to the agreements that people almost. Here's an interesting cultural piece of tidbit. So you have the Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville. Amazing
Yep, been
museum.
there.
Almost everything, and this is my understanding, almost everything in the Country Music Hall of Fame is donated. Almost everything in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is borrowed.
Borrowed. I would have even thought it was purchased.
Or I don't think they really
So
do
like
much
the Pink
donated
Floyd
or.
wall. I love the
Yeah,
Pink Floyd wall. I
it's
also love
cool.
what has been, scribbled on it, but whatever.
Yeah.
I love the Pink Floyd wall. So that's probably on loan.
Yeah, I think almost. I know I have a brother that donated a Les Paul guitar that he bought at auction to the Rock Hall. But almost everything, as my understanding, is borrowed. And part of the problem was, as we transition to a digital world, the old agreements did not cover digital capture of costumes.
Instagram, Facebook,
Right.
all
This
of this
stuff didn't,
stuff.
and there's been an incredibly fast transition to a digital world. And in the prior world, Greg Harris is the current CEO of the Rock Hall, and he's done an amazing job really modernizing and his whole team. I mean, he really has an incredible team at the Rock Hall. And just to modernize it to from the garage where you can go in and play every instrument with your friends. I mean, how
My
cool is
favorite
that,
part, yeah.
right? Go into a singing booth. I learned out just how awful I am at singing when I'm trying to sing along with Graham Nash. It's I'm horrible. I'm
But
horrible.
what a fun experience. Now, 13 years, what is you've met a lot of cool people. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
question I get all the time. Who's the most famous person you've ever met, or who were you most excited to meet? People are always surprised by my answer, but I want to hear your answer first.
Well, the most famous person I've ever met was I met Hillary Clinton
Well, I meant
twice.
was that through the Rock
But
Hall?
that was not through the Rock Hall,
Okay,
but that
through
was
the
the most
Rock.
famous person. Through the Rock Hall.
Yeah, or
So
what's
I
the coolest thing you've been able to do or experience? Because
so
you are on this board, you do raise
yeah.
an incredible amount of money,
Yeah.
which is how Jamie found out I'm poor. Um, it's like, wait, no, you're poor. You can no. Um, but you've had a lot of experiences. You go to the induction ceremonies,
Yeah.
you go to the events, you travel around the world. You've had a lot of fun. You've met a lot of people. What is the coolest thing, if you had to pick one thing that's happened to you being on the board of trustees for the Rock Hall and Museum?
So I will say I have a bunch of friends I've gotten out of my Rock Hall relationship. Spike, the Queen, Steve Fossen from Heart, his wife, Summer, great friends. Uh, the coolest thing that I ever had was they had an exhibit at the museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It was called, I think it was like Instruments of Sound or something like that. And I went to the opening party. We had, Steve Miller, despite his complaining, played the opening for the Rock Hall at
Oh,
the,
he is a complainer. Wait, I didn't say that out loud, did I?
but he put up, right? So whatever the
Yeah.
he says, his actions belie his words. And great show, by the way. And I got to meet passing each other, going to the restroom. I got to meet Jimmy Page. And you talk about rock gods, right? And I'm walking past and I go, and me being me, I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. I said, "Oh, Mr. Page, I have to, I'm on the board. I just want to thank you for coming. It's awesome. You're one of my rock heroes. Such amazing." And he says, "Oh, you're on the board. How'd you get on the board?"
See, we all have the same question.
Right? Very accusatory. How'd you get on the board? And my answer was, I told them they had to have me, which is true,
Which is the true story.
which is a true story. And he just said, "Well, I guess that's as rock and roll as anything."
I love it. Now, here's my question. Who was coming out of the bathroom, you or Jimmy?
It was midway. It was midway. I can't
Okay,
remember
I
which
want to know.
direction.
I want to
I
know.
think.
I want to check and see who washed their hands.
Well, I'm hoping he did. He was coming out, and I was going in, and he had a little entourage, and I inserted myself into the entourage. And I mean, I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to have a couple words with
Yeah,
with
when is that ever going to happen to you? All
no.
right, in closing, why should somebody visit the Rock Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland, Ohio?
It is such an amazing place that holds so much history. I mean, how rare is it to find someone that hasn't been touched in some way by rock music? And to go there and to see whether it be photography exhibits or the costumes of the people and to learn about the history. I mean, turns out Ohio, I mean, just a story about how it wound up in Ohio is an amazing story. And to see all that and the interaction, there's just
Do you
an
have it?
energy.
Well, and now I have to ask you, what's the short version of how did it end up in Ohio?
As I understood, it was something like 15 or 17 cities submitted plans, and Cleveland was the only one that submitted a business plan.
Hey,
And there's a
there you
lot of
go,
history. The
folks. It's
term
all
rock and
about
roll.
business.
Alan Freed coined the term rock and roll on a radio station in Cleveland. His ashes sit in the museum in an urn.
I am on a whole other story, and I'll tell you sometime, but I'm writing a TV series, and one of the writers that I'm working with, we've been working together for several weeks when she goes, "Oh, yeah, Alan Freed's my grandfather." And I was like, "What?" And Maybe you should have mentioned that at the beginning of, hi, I used to be a rock DJ.
It's amazing. It's crazy. The connection. It's such a, I've met such amazing people, and it's just, music brings people together in a world, in a time when there's so much division and divisiveness. Music is just it brings people together, and it doesn't matter what country, what religion, what politics. Music is a common theme, and it's for me, it's just it's I'm incredibly honored to be a part of the process. I look back and I'm like, I had no business at that time being on the board of trustees, but I've earned my way in, and at this point, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of that. There's like 80 trustees, to be clear. Most of them are based in Cleveland, and these are people that really, I mean, they transformed the city of Cleveland. They really did. I mean, the Rock Hall has become an anchor to that city, and it's an amazing city. And I really encourage anybody who's in the area, if you're within driving distance or you can catch a flight, get out there and check it out, because it's during the summer. They have live music on the plaza. To check out their website, you can see all the schedules of their live music. They have online programs. You can go online and just engage with the Rock Hall and get all this amazing education. If you're an educator, you could reach out to them and they'll do online classes for your kids for free. I mean, it's an amazing resource. So you should, I mean, you visited, and it's great. It worked out. And, you don't have to be in the rock and roll business to walk out of there just feeling like you were touched by rock and roll.
You've been listening to Dayna's Diner, a weekly conversation with the men and women who created your favorite classic hits. Dayna's Diner is produced by Dayna Steele and Houston Radio Platinum.